Hey friends, Andrew Carruthers here, Education Director for Sam Villa. One of the most commonly searched for haircuts on the entire internet is just a simple, long layer. So we thought we'd give you a tutorial on a really simple, basic shape that gives you beautiful, airy layers, plus lots of tips on how do you adapt this shape for any clientele and for any hair density. So we're gonna get into the sectioning first. Let's get after it. Before we get into the sectioning, one thing that we always want to do is we want to prepare the hair with some product. We love the Redken One United mainly just because it gives the hair a nice slip and it's great for sectioning, but it does not leave the hair oily at all, especially for those of you that might have fine hair or your guests have fine hair. This is a great leave-in that's not going to make it heavy. So we're going to mist that through. Next step is let's get the sectioning in. We're gonna go into a sectioning that we call the foundational breakdown. It's so that we can get the head sectioned off into the different areas that make the biggest difference. Sides, back, top. Those will be the major transitions that we'll have to deal with. So the first thing we'll do is just section right at the vertical transition. This is the area of the head that transitions from being more vertical up into more of the top of the head. And we'll continue that back and around as we follow the crown. And the crown has a slight dip downward. So we'll follow that dip as we go around. And then we'll just balance it out on the opposite side. Now on the mannequin head, this is gonna be perfectly balanced side to side because she comes out of a factory. But the guests that sit in your salon do not. So don't freak out when you try this. And one side looks slightly lower than the other. It's more important that you keep this balanced with their natural head shape. So be really cautious as you part that off. If you need to check yourself, you can take your comb, place it in a vertical position, and just slip your finger right behind the comb, right where it pinches between the comb and the head. That's gonna be where that vertical transition stops. And then everything up here on top, we're gonna be working with slightly differently, and we're gonna talk about the variations based on hair density. So we'll just take that, twirl it up into a nice little knot, and place one of our dry sectioning clips in. I know that the hair is wet, but the dry sectioning clips hold the hair really nicely. And that's balanced enough for me. I'm not gonna go crazy. Next section we're going to take is we're going to find where the hairline changes right behind the ear. And this is gonna be really essential for the face framing portion. And one of the things we don't wanna do is we don't wanna keep cutting hair over and over again. So if I included this piece of hair that's gonna become more face framing into the rest of the haircut, I'm gonna cut it twice. That's just inefficient. So we find right where that hairline changes and drops down. Now, if your guest wanted less face framing, you could easily scoot this section forward so that you are dedicating more of the hair into the layering pattern and less of the hair into the face framing layers. And then we'll just clip those two pieces forward. And that's telling us to leave those alone. We're gonna step to the center back now. And at center back, we're gonna take a 1-inch vertical section. So just a section straight up and down and about 1 inch wide. We are gonna keep this slightly loose. We're not gonna get crazy precise and hard lines with this. So don't get super obsessive about the exact size of the section. The main thing that you want is something that you can be consistent with. So we'll take that 1-inch section. Now from there, we want to decide what elevation and finger angle we want to create for the layering pattern. This is really going to depend on hair density because what happens is as we take the elevation and then choose our finger angle, this determines how much weight is taken away from the top and how much is left at the bottom. If my elevation is more low, I'm going to take more weight and density out of the perimeter and leave more weight and density towards the top of the shape. The higher that my elevation becomes, the more weight and density I'll leave in the perimeter, and the more weight and density I'll take away from the top. So you have to decide based on your client's density. We're gonna go right in the middle because our Lydia mannequin head here, she has just really medium density hair. So we're going to elevate to 45 degrees above horizontal. So there would be horizontal, we're gonna go 45 degrees above that. What that's gonna do is give us a really nice balance of fully layering the hair, but allowing there still to be density on the perimeter edge. We're gonna use the 6 3/4 inch Streamline Series shear. This is just a personal favorite shear for me right now. That's a lot of why I'm choosing it, but we wanna have a shear that's long enough that as you do the point cutting, you're actually able to get into the hair to create some texture. So there's the elevation, 45 degrees above the horizontal. You'll see my finger angle is pretty much perpendicular with the grain of the hair. If I wanted to take a little bit more length off the top and leave a little bit more towards the bottom, we could change the finger angle slightly, but we're just gonna go perpendicular. At this point, there's no over direction necessarily. Both sides of the section are coming into the center of the section. Now, I am gonna drop this out of its position just so you can see the point cut better. So we're going to work with not a super aggressive point cut. We want this to stay very, very soft, very invisible. We want these layers to be very airy, very loose, and we don't want to see hard lines within the shape. So by taking that very soft point cut, it's going to give us a shape that's very, very loose. Now, one thing that you're probably going to notice is we did not put in a perimeter yet. We didn't go down here and cut in a heavy one length. And the reason for that is efficiency is going to teach us that if we just work with the hair up here first, then we can come back down here to create the perimeter, and we're not going to cut that hair twice. Again, the less often we touch that same piece of hair, the more efficient we're going to be. If you want these layers to get longer as you move forward, you can over direct back. We're going to keep it balanced with the head shape, so we're going to continue with a natural over direction, which means both sides of that section are going to get over directed into the center. We're going to go to that 45 degrees above horizontal elevation, find our guide, and then again, just gently point cut to that guide. So what's really key here is consistency. So section size will be consistent, elevation will be consistent, over direction will be consistent. And we're choosing all those things with intent and purpose so that we're building the shape that we want instead of having to try and readjust later. So this is a pretty simple shape. We're just going to continue with that 45 degrees above horizontal elevation, find our previously cut section as our guide, and then use that 6 3/4 inch Streamline Series shear to just gently remove the length. So I'm going to continue on working down the right side, and then we'll switch to the left side, same exact process. As we get to this last section, one thing to be very cautious of is the head shape is changing right here. It's starting to head forward on us because we've passed the horizontal transition. The horizontal transition is right here. If you're Redken trained, you know this is the corner back. But this is a really important change in direction because a lot of times what happens is we keep our body in the back of the head, and as the head moves away from us, we create a lot of over direction. So just be cautious of that transition. And when you take that last section, you're probably going to be just in front of that transition. So move your body so that your over direction stays consistent. This is where we do tend to get into a lot of trouble with creating weight right behind the ear. So just be conscious of that little transition in the direction of the head shape. And you'll notice I'm here on her left side now, and I haven't changed my body position. I haven't started to step over to this side and pull the hair to that side then. And it's for two reasons. Number one, we're not over directing forward or back to create length forward or back, but especially when we start to get into these body positions where our fingers are kind of more on a diagonal, we find if we change body position side to side, it becomes inconsistent. So we've discovered that for us, it's just better to stay in a similar body position on both sides, and that keeps this line very, very consistent. All right, so now let's go into the top. So we're gonna drop this top area down. And what we'll do here is we'll section again for what we're going to preserve for the face framing portion of the layers. One thing that we'll probably notice is that this line, if we carry it straight up, straight up, straight up, we're going to be behind that pinnacle or the peak or the high point of the head. And most of the hair that sits behind that high point, that hair is not going to fall more towards the side or more towards the front. So we don't want to include that in our face framing. So we're going to take the section from where it ends on the side. We're going to find the high point of the head and section to that. So you'll end up with a slightly diagonal back type of a section. Then just marry that on the other side. So what we're parting off now is the difference between the hair that's going to live more on the sides and front of the head and the hair that's going to live more in the crown area. So you can see now we have more of a crown section. We'll take that hair that's left in the front, just part it down the center for now. It doesn't matter where she parts for the moment. Incorporate that into the sides, and then isolate it with a clip. Let's get into the crown section here. Because the crown is a very round surface, we're going to work in pie-shaped sections, because these pie-shaped sections, as they radiate down, will turn into a vertical section. If we kind of take this section as a true vertical section, what ends up happening is you almost end up diagonal on the shape of the head. So this pie-shaped section keeps us more vertical. The most important thing is that center point of the pie shape always goes back to the center, to the high point. And we're going to want to find ourselves in about the same width of section at the bottom of the section. So just think about that section size that you had in those previously cut sections. Let's grab a little bit of water here. We just want to keep her damp. This isn't something that we have to keep the hair sopping wet for. So just enough water in the hair for control. We added the, we added the One United as a cutting lotion. So as long as we keep the hair damp, we should have really great control over the hair. Again, here you have decisions to make, because if we want shorter layers, then we want to continue to keep a higher elevation. And we could even change elevation here as we transfer into the top of the head. And if I wanted a lot of fullness, a lot of body on top of the head, maybe I would go there. But we want to keep these layers a little bit on the longer feeling side. So we are going to keep the elevation consistent from the bottom, which was that 45 degrees above horizontal. What that does is it keeps me from getting shorter as I go into the top. In fact, it's going to start to get a little bit longer. And for you super hair dorks, yes, as we get onto the top of the head, it's almost going to create a bit of graduation towards the top of the head. And that's going to leave us that longer feel to the layers. Again, take a slight piece of that previously cut section, continue to pie shape along the head. Again, we're not going to over direct back here. We're going to take both sides of the sections, meet that into the center of the section. Elevate up, there's my guide from underneath, and there's my guide from just behind. So the great thing is you have two guides now to follow, and softly point cut to the previously cut section. Again, consistency is really the name of the game here. We just want to be cautious with our elevation or over direction, and clean sectioning is really important for this, because if we start to lose our section cleanliness, especially with these pie-shaped sections, we tend to start to kick off to one side or the other, and we'll create some asymmetry in the haircut. So if you find that in your haircuts, you find that one side tends to get longer than the other, two things to look at. One would be your sectioning. Is your sectioning traveling in an odd way around the head shape? The other thing to check into is, what is your over direction? Is the over direction staying consistent? And over direction is actually from our feet more so than our hands, because wherever our feet are, that's where the hair is going to want to go. So just be conscious that your body has to move for your over direction to stay consistent. So I'm just going to continue, and you can start to see this really beautiful layered shape starts to come together, really soft, really airy, long layers. So we're going to continue one more section here on the right side and then replicate that on the left side. Now that all our layering is finished through the back, and as it's started to work into the sides, now we do want to start down here and get into the perimeter. And the reason for that is the face framing is going to need to be very cautiously detailed to the perimeter. So we need that perimeter line. We got some efficiency out of not cutting that perimeter right off the bat with the layers. But now it's really important that we have that perimeter length set in so that we can base our face framing layers off of the perimeter length. Let's just give her a touch of moisture again with that continuous mist bottle. I'm using our short cutting comb, our Signature Series short cutting comb in white, because she has slightly darker hair. She has kind of a medium tone of hair, so we could really kind of get away with either color. The short cutting comb is just a favorite of mine personally, because I like the super wide teeth on one side and then the finer teeth on the opposite. Sometimes with longer hair, I know that Sam prefers the long cutting comb, which is a great choice as well. All right, so let's get down to the perimeter. Most important thing whenever you're cutting the perimeter of any haircut is that you're looking at it as close to natural fall as possible. So take your time, make sure that she's combed out into her natural falling position. We're gonna layer around the front, so I'm not too worried about, again, the natural parting at this point, but if we were cutting something more like a bob, then I'd be really cautious to make sure that I was also working in the natural falling position. We're going to follow the natural head shape really carefully by paying attention to, again, the flatter curve across the back of the head, and then right about here you can see that's the horizontal transition. So horizontally, that's where it transitions more from being that more gentle slope across the back of the head and then turning a sharp corner and becoming the gentle curvature through the side of the head. So pay attention right there for that change in direction. Because we're going to again work with texture, no problem with putting a little bit of tension on the hair with the fingers, still be gentle with it so you're not disturbing it too far from the natural fall of the hair. And then we're gonna look for, where do we start to regain some of our density on the perimeter. Now, if she would have sat down in the chair before and she said, hey, you know, I don't really want to lose too much length off my hair, then of course we would have been really cautious with that first length on the layers to make sure that we were preserving all the length on the perimeter and not cutting too much density out of it. We're gonna keep our one length very horizontal, very parallel with the floor, so we'll keep our fingers just very parallel with the floor. And again, that really gentle soft point cut with the 6 3/4 inch streamline series shear. So you can see we've hit that point where the transition happens. So we'll rotate her. If it was me in the salon, of course, we'd be walking around the head instead of rotating her, or you know, you can rotate your chair too, which is great. The key is just to make sure that you're moving. And just follow that perimeter around the head. So I'm gonna complete this side, and then I'm just gonna step to her right-hand side and complete that side. Okay, once the perimeter is finished, now we're just gonna again redampen if it got a little dry there. I live here in Southern Oregon where it is incredibly dry, so the mannequin heads just dry up so fast. I swear I go through a bottle of this water every time I do a haircut here. All right. So now let's get into the face framing. We'll go back to our sectioning, which was kind of a diagonal from that high point back to where it starts to meet the hairline here in the behind the ear. And we're just gonna isolate that side to side. And don't worry if these things don't all blend together perfectly, which I know a lot of you get really upset about if it doesn't. We're going to show you how to blend everything back together and pull it all back together. Now, if you have not seen it, we have a face framing tutorial. It's actually one of our most popular YouTube videos we've ever created. And we'll put a link to that in the description because it has a very similar concept to it. We're gonna do things slightly differently with this one because we're going to leave these feeling just a little bit longer, not quite as heavy as a face framing as that specific tutorial. But we even have an entire playlist of just face framing tutorials for you guys there. We're going to start from the top because the top really is our shortest point. And for a lot of our guests, that's the most important thing. That's what they're most concerned about because they'll say, well, we want the shortest point of the layers to fall at a certain point on the face, or they might be really cautious about the lengths on their head. So they'll say, oh, please don't cut anything shorter than this. So a lot of times it's intelligent for you to go ahead and start in the shortest point of the haircut. So that way you know that you're protecting their needs and also protecting yourself so that they don't get upset. So in the other tutorial, we over-directed everything very straightforward to the front of the face, which gives us a very, very strong drop-off of length from short to long, front to back. This time we're going to over-direct a little differently. It's not gonna come all the way forward, but if you look at it from a side view here, this is how the hair is going to fall. So if we over-direct just slightly forward, that's going to naturally give us some short to long motion. Then whatever we elevate to is going to give us what kind of weight balance we had, kind of similar to the back. So we're going to over-direct forward pretty gently. Then our finger angle, again, can make a big difference here because if I take the finger angle And we just kind of take the fingertips way out that direction. You can see we're gonna create a lot of short to long, and it's going to dramatically drop off into that length. If we keep the fingers more perpendicular to the grain of the hair, then it's gonna be a more gradual drop off towards the lengths. That's what we want at first, because if we go too steep, then we start to connect to the perimeter, we're not going to bring the face framing back very far. So over direct that forward. You'll see that finger angle is perpendicular to the grains of the hair. So what's going to be really important is the shortest point that we cut here. In fact, for you and your guests' safety, what you can do is take a very small piece here, and you can drape it to the face. Be very, very light with this because you want to allow for that natural bounce that's going to happen as it dries, and the fact that it's going to curve off to here. Don't pull it down straight and then cut it. It's going to be too short. So drape it around the face, keep it very gentle, and let's say she's wanting it to be maybe just around the lip line, because that's a really beautiful place to put that first piece. The thing that we want to do with lengths is we want to point to things, or we want to draw the attention away from something. So if she's got great lips or great cheekbones or great jawline, you can place things into that area to really draw attention to that. All right, so we have a little guide there now. That's gonna make sure that we're protected. There's that guide right there. Actually, I changed my mind. I think we are going to just take a little bit more diagonal finger angle. I think if I stay too perpendicular, it actually would keep the face framing too short, too far back. So we're gonna just stretch the fingertips outward a little bit, extending that length forward. And the reason we're keeping this at a little lower elevation and a little less over direction than the previous is to keep a bit more weight to these ends. The previous way that we showed you how to do it would take more weight off of everything. And it's gonna, again, create shorter in the center and then a really quick drop off into length if we over direct it stronger forward. This is gonna give us a really nice gradual buildup of length and weight as it falls back. So we'll now take that bottom section out, incorporate the two. We're going to use the exact same over direction that we did for the top, just that slight over direction forward. Now what we have is we have a start and finish point. And what's great about that is now it's just a game of connect the dots. So here's the start point. And then we know that we want to connect to the perimeter right there at the back of the ear. And that's that finish point right there. So that tells me exactly what my finger angle needs to be. Start, finish. And then again, just a soft point cut. I feel like that was very Bob Ross of me to say. Just a soft little fluffy point cut. So as you can see, that builds a really nice gradual buildup of length and weight towards that perimeter. And again, don't worry too much if this matches this right now. First off, it doesn't matter as much as you think. But number two, I'll show you a little way to adjust that after we finish the left-hand side. So we're gonna go through the identical process over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to actually step in front of her and work in front of her. It's just gonna be a little more natural than me standing behind on this side and trying to create this sort of finger angle. And I've got to change body position a little bit just because we were on that diagonal on this side. So I'm gonna step to this side, stand in front of her, but identical process. All right, now that we're finished with the front, we wanna see, do we have a blend between the back and the front? And I can tell you right now that yes, there's definitely gonna be a little bit of disconnection because we've changed elevations, we've changed over directions, and the lengths are just not going to match up. But again, we would like to promote that you don't get super worked up about this because we chose what we did here for a purpose. We chose what we did here for a purpose. Now, as you blow this out especially, maybe you'll say, okay, I can see the line between the two. So here's how you work with that. Really, it's all about just creating some visual connection. It doesn't have to necessarily become something where you're matching things together. So what we'd suggest is that you take sections between the 2 points, and you'll see that there's that little detachment, well, actually a significant detachment. And really all you need to do is just kind of create some points of connection within there. You don't want to match things up because again, you chose everything that you chose for a really specific reason here. And if you go through and all of a sudden start over directing this back and blending everything together, what you're gonna end up with is something that changes the purpose of your shape. So just go through in horizontal sections between the two. You can see there's my detachment. Again, we don't want to destroy that. So we can even come in from behind and just do a little bit of slide cutting between the two. There wasn't much of a detachment in the sections above. There's a little bit bolder detachment between these lower sections. Be cautious as you get to the weakness on top of the ear. Again, you can see there's that detachment. Work from behind with the shear and just gently, softly blend between the two. So we're gonna do that on the opposite side. Then we're gonna get into the blow dry. Especially with these really beautiful, softly long layered haircuts, a great blow dry is so incredibly important. We're going to start with product application, of course, our absolute favorite volumizer, Red King Guts 10. The way that this distributes into the hair is so awesome because where you really want the focus of the product application is right at the scalp when you're working with hold products. You can get some of it through the mids and ends as well, but if you want body in the hair, the primary place that you want to focus that product is right at the base. So having something that sprays out as a foam, but it goes right exactly where you want it instead of having to put it into your hand or onto a brush or something like that. Such an incredible product. And the great thing is it does have a pretty incredible hold to it without feeling sticky in the hair, which I don't know about you, no one likes sticky hair. So we'll brush that through just to distribute the product. We're not going to get into a ton of details of the blow dry just because we want this particular tutorial to be focused on the haircut, not so much the blow dry, but we have tons and tons of blow drying content out there for you guys already. We are gonna work first with a wrap dry, so you'll see we'll go through and work the hair to the head shape first, just to start getting some moisture out of the hair, and we'll work it back and forth. What that does is it creates a more natural feeling to the movement of the blow dry. Then we're gonna switch to our Artist Series spiral thermal brush. This has become a huge favorite of our entire art team. We're using this because we want to get some polish on the hair, but we also want to build some shape into the hair. So the thermal core is going to help to create the heat that we need to get some wave texture into the hair, but the boar hair bristle is going to pull that cuticle super smooth. We're also going to use our new special edition rose gold light ionic dryer. This thing is so pretty. This will be released right around the same time that this video will be, so you guys will be getting access to it right at the very beginning if you're seeing this video right as it's released. We're going to take the nozzle, we're going to put it on slight diagonal, which helps us to not have to pick our elbow up so that the nozzle is parallel with the head. Like I said, we're going to wrap dry forward first, then we're going to switch and work back just to get natural movement. Then we'll switch into the round brush. Cool, with the blow dry finished, now it's time to get into our detailing phase. We want to really focus in on the face framing because it's such a strong feature of this. This is what she's going to really pay attention to in this haircut. The main thing that probably needs adjusted right now is going to be the weight distribution, potentially a little bit of the perimeter. Because we did cut everything at elevation, there might be a couple little irregularities just based on the natural shape of her hairline. So we're gonna check in on both of those. Let's first look at the density. Most of the time, you're going to find that you're going to have a little bit more density up here, and then it's gonna be weaker here. And that's just kind of typical. A little more density through this area, and then right around this bottom hairline, it tends to get a little finer and a little more sparse. We wanna balance out that density a bit, so we'll first come to the top. We're going to use the Signature Series Invisablend shear. What's important about this shear is it's gonna be incredibly soft, and it's not gonna take a ton of hair away with each cut. Plus, since the bottom is actually not a sharp blade, it's a polished surface, it's going to allow us to slide through the hair quite easily after we close the shear. So we're gonna just maybe enter in about halfway into the mid strand, close, and then slide through, and you're gonna notice not a ton of hair is gonna come out. We're going to slide out just a little bit farther and close, and then we'll slide out a little bit farther and close, and a little bit farther and a little bit farther. What we're doing by starting in the mid-strand and working out is mimicking what hair naturally does. Hair will always be its densest at the base, and then its lightest in the ends because of the natural shedding process. So if you camp out for too long in one spot, let's say we sit here in the mid-strand and we hit that 2 or 3 times, what you do is you create sort of an unnatural feel to the hair because you keep density here, and then there's sort of a line of demarcation almost of where the hair starts to become thinner and finer. By gradually working out to those ends, that allows you to keep that very natural feel to the density. A little bit goes a long way, so we'll do a little bit, and then reintroduce that into the rest of the shape. That's actually feeling super good, so we're gonna leave that alone. And a lot of times it might just be this front hairline. There might not need to be a ton of adjustment. Do that on the opposite side. We're making sure that the teeth are facing down as well. One of the theories with blending shears is that whichever direction that the teeth are facing, the hair will be influenced to move in that direction. We want those ends to fall down and back, so we want to be careful to make sure that the teeth are facing that direction. That's feeling good as well, so we're going to leave that be. Now let's comb through this front and just see how that perimeter is falling. There's just a little tiny point right there that the hair's just feeling a little out of balance. And we can even use the invisible end there just to gently peel a little bit of length off that piece, because it's not a complete and total change to the shape, it's just readjustment really. After you get that face framing feeling just how you want it, now of course it's time to readjust anything through the rest of the haircut, and it could just be the exact same thing, just looking at the density of the shape. The mannequin heads, these Lydia mannequin heads, they do have a little bit more density right here in the crown, and you may even be able to see that on video. These top layers tend to get a little heavy feeling, especially because remember, as we came past the crown, we didn't increase elevation. We kept the elevation at that 45 degrees above horizontal. So what that does is it builds a little bit of length towards the top of the layer. In theory, it's actually graduation because it's going short to long towards the top of the head, but whatever. That's little details. What you need to know is if it goes short to long from bottom to top, it's going to build some weight. So we can do the same thing here, just very gently. Remove a little bit of that weight and density through the mids and ends. Be cautious when you're removing weight, because a lot of times what we find is that people just want to go to the ends and adjust weight at the ends. That's not really where weight and density lives. Weight and density lives more in the mid strand of the hair. So we've got to get that shear in to where the weight and density actually lives. Now it's starting to feel nice and light and soft, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Now remember too that this back area isn't perfectly connected or blended through to the front, and I just want you to take notice that that's not apparent in the end shape, is it? So it shows you that it doesn't always have to be everything perfectly matchy-matchy. You can select things where you want them to be. We wanted a little bit more layer through that back, for good reason, because there's a lot more hair back here. But we wanted to keep some density to create a really full and solid face frame. So sometimes you have to imbalance the shape to get visual balance. Make sense? Final step, of course, is to add just a bit of finishing product. We're gonna keep this one super, super simple. We're just gonna use a bit of Shine Flash 02 from Redken. This is a favorite of ours for very light, soft hair because you can get some shine and some slip, and there's just enough of a touch to it that it helps to separate the layers and give it some texture without ever feeling oily or greasy. So we'll just lightly mist that through the entire shape, focusing the product more through the ends of the hair. A lot of times shine and texture products, we want to keep more through the ends, less towards the scalp. And then just give her a final little fluff. This is the part at the end of the service where you're like, oh, look how beautiful you look. Who's your neighbor? You should recommend them to me. I need you back in here in 6 weeks to get your next appointment. Starting to finalize the service. It's always hard on video because I don't have a mirror, so excuse me for a second. Let me make sure she's looking perfect for you guys. I like that. One thing too that we did not talk about, and I promised that I would, so I'm gonna step back just a little bit, is I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, you cut this off of a center part. What if they don't have a center part? This is a huge, huge, huge question with tons of answers. I'm gonna give you my personal opinion, mainly just because that's all I can really give you. You're gonna get a different opinion on this from everyone. For the most part, I would say that I cut most of my clients from a center part. And the reason for that is I didn't find that most of my clients always wore the exact same part. So if I cut this asymmetrically, if I part this over on the side and leave this much longer and this shorter so that they fall at the exact same point based on that part, if she decides that she wants to kind of do this one day, now it's completely out of balance again. So what my clients and I discovered is that for the most part, it worked really well to just keep things based off the center, especially on these more movable haircuts. Now, if your guest has a very heavy side part that it always gets parted from, then you might want to look into how do you imbalance the layers in a way so that they fall at the same point. But that's honestly a whole nother video in and of itself. So let's review this real quick. First thing, you want to part it off into the foundational breakdown. Find your vertical transition by laying the comb on the side of the head. We're going to part that around to the crown. Make sure you follow the natural shape of the crown there. Then we're going to part just where the hairline starts to become weak again as it goes up and over top of the ear. We're going to part right at that point. Everything on top is just going to stay pinned up and out of the way for now. In the back, we're going to take a vertical section. If you want more density removed from the perimeter, you're going to keep that elevation lower. If you want to leave more density to the perimeter but take more weight from the top, you're going to increase the elevation. We went right in the middle with that 45 degrees above horizontal. For our shape, no over direction forward or back. We call that natural over direction. That's where you take the outside of the section and you bring it both into the center to keep it following the natural head shape. Once we reach that line, we're going to leave everything in the front alone. As we get to the top, we're going to find the high point of the head and connect to the section from below. And we're going to pie shape through the crown, but basically mimic exactly what we did through the lower portion of the haircut. Once all that is finished, we're going to laser line in our perimeter. Well, not laser line in, texture in the perimeter. Then we'll bring in the face framing. We're going to keep this one lower elevation, just that nice slight diagonal forward or over-directed forward movement to create the shape that falls back and away from the face. We're going to adjust the finger angle depending on how quickly we want to drop from the shortest point of the face framing layers into the perimeter. And then when we get to the side, we'll have a little piece of the perimeter right there at the bottom edge, and we'll have the first piece that we cut as our guides, and you just connect the two. Then give her a nice blow dry, readjust your shape a little bit, do some blending if you feel like it needs it, and that's how you get these beautiful long layers. If you have any further questions on the shape or anything else, please leave us a comment. We love to hear from you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Andrew Carruthers, Education Director for Sam Villa.